March 2002, Chhapra, North Bihar. Behind the thick, unforgiving walls of the local jail, a story was unfolding. But this isn't a story that was ever meant to be told. It's one of fear, of defiance, and of a kind of justice that's swift, silent, and, well, it leaves no witnesses. That night, the Chhapra district jail was quiet. I mean, too quiet. You know, that kind of silence that feels heavy, unnatural, the kind of silence that always comes right before a storm. Inside, the men were awake. But this wasn't the usual restlessness of being locked up. This was different. This was a sharp, cold dread. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't a jail full of hardened convicts serving life sentences. No, most of the men inside were what you call under trials. They were just waiting for a justice system that, for all intents and purposes, had already forgotten they even existed. They were completely trapped in this legal limbo, and they knew better than anyone just how fragile their lives really were. And then, after midnight, came the spark. An order was delivered. No warrant, no official paperwork, nothing. Just a demand. 5 specific inmates were to be transferred. Right now. Now, to the prisoners, this wasn't some routine transfer. In the dead of night, it felt like a death sentence. It felt like the prelude to what's known as a fake encounter. A grimly common practice where prisoners are killed and it's all just written off as an escape attempt. But see, that midnight order didn't create the crisis. It just lit the fuse. Chhapra jail was already a powder keg. It was packed to the brim with desperation and resentment, just waiting for a spark. It really all started with the numbers. Just think about this. 1,200 men crammed into a space built for only 350. That's not just overcrowding, that's a pressure cooker. Every single inch of space was fought over. Tensions between rival groups were always simmering, and the air itself, it was just thick with hopelessness. And again, it's so important to remember who these men were, under trials. They hadn't been proven guilty of anything yet, but they were already serving a sentence of just waiting, indefinitely. These are men whose lives are on pause, their entire futures hanging by the thread of a file, probably lost somewhere in a bureaucratic maze. This place wasn't just a prison. It felt more like a grave waiting to be filled. So you had this perfect storm, right? The mysterious order, the complete lack of transparency, and on top of it all, that deep, paralyzing fear of being executed without ever seeing a courtroom. The prisoners, they decided they weren't going to go silently. They resisted. And in that single moment of collective defiance, the entire balance of power inside Chhapra jail just flipped. So what started as just resisting a transfer order, it exploded. It became a full-blown siege. For 3 straight days, the inmates were in complete control. They became the jailers. And the authorities, they were locked out, totally helpless. And the whole thing escalated so fast, it was shocking. Day 1, the inmates seized control. By day 2, they're organized. They're making demands from the rooftops, and they are not backing down. Negotiations, they went nowhere. The authorities responded by cutting off the water and electricity, basically turning the standoff into a war of attrition. That's when the final decision was made. The jail would have to be retaken by force. The prisoners didn't just lock the gates either. They fortified the whole place. They armed themselves with anything and everything they could find, even creating these crude explosives they called string bombs. They took the high ground, using the rooftops as watchtowers. And maybe the most dangerous thing they did, they turned the main gate into a massive booby trap. They stacked cooking gas cylinders right up against it, ready to create a massive explosion if anyone dared to try and break through. Well, with negotiations totally failed and the situation getting worse by the hour, the Bihar government just ran out of patience. The order came down from the top: end this revolt, no matter what it takes. There was just no way they could get through the main gate. It was a death trap, plain and simple. So the superintendent of police made a call that completely defied standard protocol. He decided that he and a small team would have to go over the high outer walls, right into the heart of the hornet's nest. I mean, this was an incredibly high-risk move. You've got this small team completely surrounded by over 1,000 hostile inmates, and their job is to get to that gate and manually drag those gas cylinders away. Only then could the main force even think about breaching the entrance. What followed was just a brutal 4-hour battle inside the jail yard. It was fought with everything: tear gas, stones, crude bombs, and bullets. By the time the smoke finally cleared, the revolt was over. The siege was broken. But the story? The story was far from over. You see, the official account of what happened was neat and tidy. The reality, though, was anything but. Officially, the human cost was all tallied up. 4 prisoners dead, dozens more injured on both sides. The authorities claimed they had only used necessary force, that they only fired in self-defense. But behind that official story, questions started popping up almost immediately. And the divide here was just stark. On one side, you have the official story, and on the other, a whole series of haunting questions. Local villagers started whispering about different numbers, higher numbers. Key inmate witnesses, they were suddenly transferred, which effectively silenced them. And the post-mortem reports, the very documents that could have proven how these men died, they never made it to their families. So you have to ask, was this a riot being contained, or was it an execution disguised as one? In the end, the very system that was supposed to provide answers was the thing that buried them. There was no real independent investigation. The evidence, it was literally washed away. The jail just went back to functioning. New prisoners arrived. And the story of those 3 days in March, it was just locked away, becoming another ghost haunting the corridors. Justice, just like those prisoners, never really made it out. And all this leaves us with a question that sticks around long after the violence ended. When the state holds all the power, and when fear becomes the tool and procedure becomes the justification, how do you tell the difference between maintaining order and just committing a crime?
Maybe the real truth of what happened at Chhapra is that some crimes aren't meant to be solved. They're just erased.